I never thought I'd be locking myself in my bedroom at 8 months pregnant, but here I am, listening to my husband's footsteps downstairs and wondering how it got this bad. It started around 32 weeks, when Jake began jerking the car forward every time I tried to get in for appointments. He'd slam the gas just enough to make me stumble, then laughed as if it was some inside joke I wasn't in on. I begged him to stop. He never did, not even after I told him about the panic that would fill my throat. The same panic I'd felt years ago, through 2 miscarriages alone in bathroom stalls. He said that I was ruining his fun, as if my fear was a personal insult, as if the baby wasn't right there between us. Last week, he did it again. I'd spent the night before crying into my pillow, replaying the way my stomach had jerked when the car moved, but there he was the next morning, grinning as he revved the engine. I slammed the door so hard, the window rattled, and called an Uber. The driver kept looking at me in the rear view, probably wondering why a pregnant woman was crying silent tears into her cardigan. Jake didn't text until that night. He said that I was overreacting when I told him he couldn't come to appointments anymore. Then, more quietly, he said that I was using the baby to control him. We'd agreed not to find out the gender, but there it was, a slip, or maybe a threat. His mom texted me the next day. He was really upset about missing the ultrasound, she said. I stared at her message, thumbs hovering. She had held my hand after the second miscarriage, bringing over casseroles and saying that Jake processed grief differently. But this wasn't grief. This was him buying a $500 dinner at some steakhouse the night he'd claimed to be working late. I found the receipt in his jacket pocket while gathering laundry, the date stamped right over a week ago. When I confronted him, he shrugged and said it was a team dinner. The steakhouse was 45 minutes south of his office. Our house is 20 minutes north. My sister noticed the bruises first. She saw the yellowing fingerprints on my upper arms where Jake steadied me after moving the car. She told me that I needed to document this. I didn't tell her about the way he'd started grabbing my waist too tight when we passed in the hallway, or how he'd trip and bump into me while I was cooking. It felt too stupid to say out loud. Too married. I locked the bedroom door that night. Jake pounded on it once, hard enough to rattle the knob, then slept on the couch. He hasn't spoken to me in 3 days, but his silence is everywhere. In the way he leaves his coffee mug unwashed on the counter with deliberate rings of stains. In the paycheck deposit that was 30% lighter this month. His boss sounded confused when I called and said there'd been no pay cuts. He said that Jake had been distracted lately. As if I'd asked, the spreadsheets were in a hidden folder labeled Taxes 2022. Our shared computer still autofills his password, ChargerFan89, and I wasn't even snooping. I was just paying the electric bill. But there it was. Line items for hotels, gym memberships, AP maintenance pulling $200 a month from an account I've never seen. My sister helped me open a new bank account the next day. She said that half was fair, her finger tapping the screen until the balance split. I thought I'd feel guilty. Mostly, I felt tired. He came home with a stuffed elephant yesterday. He said that he was the baby's father, blocking the staircase. For a second, he appeared like the man who had cried when we saw the first ultrasound, the one who had rubbed my feet after work and told me that he was scared too. Then his voice became harsh. He said that I didn't get to shut him out. He called me a selfish person. Now his laptop's open on the kitchen table, a hotel receipt visible on the screen. 10 miles away, last Friday, when he said he was helping his brother move. I don't know what to do next. Has anyone else been through something like this? How do you protect yourself when the person you trusted most becomes the threat? Now for the first update. I never thought I'd spend my 3rd trimester Googling how to prove financial abuse, but here I am. 3 days after my last post, I found a hotel receipt on Jake's laptop, some boutique place 10 miles away, dated for a Friday he'd claimed to be helping his brother move. When I asked him, he didn't even blink, said it was for a coworker's anniversary surprise. I called the hotel from the bathroom later, pretending to confirm a reservation. The clerk said the room was under his name, checked out at 2 a.m. That night, I packed a hospital bag, toothbrush, socks, the stuffed elephant he'd bought, and left it at my sister's. She didn't ask questions, just slid it into her closet next to a box of old baby clothes she'd been saving for me. Jake noticed the bag was missing. He joked that he would accidentally miss the birth while microwaving leftovers. The gym membership popped up next. I was reviewing our joint account, something I'd started doing daily, and saw a $120 charge labeled as a wellness center. Jake hates gyms. He mocks people for paying to sweat. When I mentioned it, he shrugged and said he joined to de-stress. Later, I found a credit card in his gym bag, tucked behind a protein powder sample. $12,000 in charges. Bars, hotels, a spa charge from a place I'd never heard of. The dates overlapped with his late work nights. She offered to induce me at 37 weeks if my blood pressure kept spiking. I nodded, but all I could think about was Jake's reaction. He'd started calling the baby the hostage whenever I set a boundary. His mom showed up unannounced 2 days later. She stood on the porch holding a casserole dish. Said Jake felt isolated, that I was keeping him from bonding with the baby. I recorded the conversation on my phone. She left when I mentioned the lawyer. The lawyer cost half the savings I'd moved, but she warned me Jake could fight for custody if I cut him out completely. So I offered a compromise, one ultrasound with a counselor present. He refused, said it was humiliating to be monitored. That night, he left a half-empty whiskey bottle on the coffee table. I poured it down the sink. He didn't mention it, but the next morning, he accidentally bumped my hip while I was making toast. Bed rest came after a solo appointment where my blood pressure hit 150/90. The OB wrote the order in all caps. Jake mocked the printout, taping it to the fridge. He muttered that he was milking it, but I saw him glance at the numbers twice. The camera was my sister's idea. It caught Jake bringing coworkers over at 11 p.m., their laughter muffled through the walls. One woman stayed behind to help him clean up. He came home smelling like whiskey again, 3 days later. I took his keys. He called the cops, saying I was stealing his property. They left when I showed them the hospital's bed rest order. The joint account was drained the morning after my lawyer sent the separation notice. $8,400 gone. Jake claimed it was for baby expenses, but the withdrawals were all from ATMs near those boutique hotels. The police report took 2 hours to file. The officer kept flipping through pages. Labor started at 36 weeks. Jake was at work, probably. My sister drove me to the hospital. I didn't cry until the nurse asked for his contact info. I don't know what happens next. How do you co-parent with someone who keeps receipts but not promises? If anyone's navigated this, I could use advice. Thanks for listening. Now for the second update. The first time Jake held her, I almost dropped my phone. Not because he was rough, but our daughter was 27 hours old when he stormed into the hospital room 6 hours after the birth. The nurses kept glancing at me when they asked if I wanted them to stay. I said no. Big mistake. He reached for the bassinet and I flinched. He froze and stated that he was on the birth certificate. The baby stirred and he stated that I couldn't keep her from him. Later, the social worker would ask if I felt unsafe. I said I didn't know. That was the truth. I moved in with my sister the next day. Her couch had a permanent dent from her toddler's jump sessions, but she cleared out the nursery and put a secondhand crib next to the window. Jake showed up that night, pounding on the door while I breastfed. He shouted something about custody through the wood. My sister took the baby so I could slide down the wall and count the cracks in the ceiling until he left. The lawyer subpoenaed his bank records the following week. Turns out the hidden account wasn't that hidden, just under a business alias he'd used once for a side project. Withdrawals every Thursday and Sunday, always from ATMs near hotels I'd never heard of. One was a motel off the highway. Another had a rooftop bar with $20 cocktails. His pay stubs showed a demotion 3 months back. Inappropriate conduct with a junior employee. The same woman from the camera footage, the one who'd lingered after the coworkers left. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just leaned against his car, arms crossed, and said that I stopped trying the second I got pregnant. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I'd spent nights Googling how to look attractive postpartum while he'd been at a $200 a night hotel. His HR department reached out the next day. A formal letter asking if I'd testify about his behavior. I sent them everything. Dates of the car incidents, photos of the bruises, the credit card statements. They fired him 2 days later. His mom called me a career wrecker. I didn't block her number. My lawyer said to keep the paper trail. The restraining order came after he showed up at my sister's, screaming about the baby's last name. Mine. The cops found him sitting on the hood of his car, blasting a song we danced to at our wedding. He told them I was unstable. They asked if I had proof of his threats. I showed them the video of him kicking the porch step hard enough to crack the wood. Negotiating the settlement took 3 excruciating weeks. The lawyer said I could keep the house if I dropped the financial abuse claim. I took it. The alternative was dragging it out, letting him have visitation in a home he'd already stained. Sold his golf clubs and gaming console online, made $1,100. Not enough to cover the $8,400 he drained, but enough for a month's diapers. The gym membership was the final knot. His wellness center was a 24-hour chain with day passes for $15. The receptionist recognized his photo, said he'd come in every Tuesday, stay for 10 minutes, then leave through the back exit. Security footage showed him meeting her in the parking lot. I didn't watch it. Didn't need to. Therapy started on a Thursday. The office had a fish tank with 1 lethargic angelfish. I told the counselor I didn't know how to feel about Jake anymore. He missed the first mediation session. His lawyer claimed a scheduling conflict. Mine said he's bluffing. I don't know. Part of me hopes he'll disappear. The other part knows he'll fight harder once he realizes the baby's first word won't be dad. How do you split custody with someone who treats fatherhood like a scorecard? I'm supposed to protect her, but the law wants me to share. If anyone's been here, how do you trust the process when the process trusted him first? Now for the final update. The judge called it a pattern of instability, but I just call it Tuesday now. Full physical custody. Supervised visits if he wants them. He hasn't. 3 months, no calls. My lawyer says to document every missed opportunity. It'll help if he tries to crawl back. I keep a folder on my phone. Screenshots of unanswered texts, dates he ghosted the visitation center. It's thinner than I expected. Ran into her at the grocery store. The affair partner. She was in the cereal aisle, holding a box of Lucky Charms. I almost turned the cart around, but she saw me, apologized, said Jake told her we'd been separated for a year. She thought the baby was a miracle reconciliation. I didn't correct her. Let him explain that one. Sold the house. Jake fought it, saying I was stealing his equity. The realtor found empty whiskey bottles in the crawl space. Closed in 28 days. Bought a condo 10 minutes from my sister. First night there, I ordered Thai food and slept on the floor with my daughter in a laundry basket. Best sleep I'd had in months. His GoFundMe was a masterpiece. Devoted father stripped of everything. Raised $2,300 in a week. Then his cousin sent me a screenshot of Jake's Instagram story. Palm trees, a neon-lit club, timestamped 2 days after the campaign launched. I didn't share it. Didn't have to. Donors started demanding refunds when the cousin accidentally reposted it. My old coworkers threw a baby shower. They'd heard about the stuff Jake tossed. The rocking chair, the hand-me-down onesies. They brought replacements, plus a onesie that says Daddy's little tax deduction. We didn't talk about him. Just ate Costco cake and compared C-section scars. Landing the remote job was advantageous. No commute, no dress code. First paycheck direct deposited into my daughter's 529 plan. Jake's name isn't on it. The lawyer said to keep it that way. His mom sends a birthday card every month. This one had a check for $100. I keep them in a shoebox under the bed, not cashing them, not throwing them away. Maybe one day I'll let her explain why she raised a son who treats fatherhood as unimportant. Saw him at the gas station last week. His car had a dent on the passenger side, same spot where he sideswiped a pole after a guy's night. He glared through the windshield while the pump clicked. I held my daughter tighter. She was chewing on a teething ring, oblivious. He peeled out, kicking up gravel. The attendant gave me a free soda. Mama, 7 months old, and she says it like she's known it forever. I cried for an hour, not because it was sweet, but because I realized she'll never see me duck when a raised voice cuts through a room. Never watch me apologize for existing. That's worth more than any settlement. His new lawyer sent a letter. Custody renegotiation. Claims he is stable now. My attorney laughed. Showed me the filing. Jake listed his address as a motel off the interstate. Weekly rate. No kitchenette. The judge dismissed it in 12 minutes. Donated his clothes to a shelter. Found his wedding ring in the pocket of his old jacket. Pawned it for $600. Bought a stroller with all-terrain wheels. Took my daughter to the park the next day. Watched a dad push his kid on the swing. The chains were not tense. No muttered curses when the kid asked for one more push. Just easy. Normal. A friend sent me his Instagram. Private account bio says, starting over. Posts are blurry selfies in a dim room. Captions about betrayal. One photo shows a motel bedspread, stained yellow. I blocked the friend. Not out of anger. Just done. My sister says my daughter's first words should have been subpoena. We laughed so hard we woke the baby. She started babbling Baba now. I don't correct her. Tonight, I'll put her to sleep in the crib I bought with my freelance checks. The condo's quiet except for the dishwasher humming. Changed the locks twice. Paid extra for deadbolts. Jake's never seen this place. Never will. But the paperwork still ties us. The law says he gets a chance to be a dad. How do you hand your child to someone who treats love as a tool for negotiation? I followed every rule, dotted every I. Why does it feel like the system's still waiting for him to grow up? If you've been here, how do you stop anticipating something bad? How do you trust a process that took this long to see what you saw at 32 weeks?